The lithium made Sarah Mitchell's hands shake as she wrote the final equations on the laboratory whiteboard. 3 years earlier, she'd been strapped to a hospital bed during a manic episode, screaming about conspiracies that didn't exist. Tonight, she was about to publish research that would revolutionize bipolar treatment worldwide. The same brain that had nearly destroyed her was about to save millions of others. Welcome to Human Stories. Before we dive into this incredible journey of mental illness, scientific breakthrough, and the thin line between madness and genius, tell me in the comments, have you or someone you know struggled with mental health? And if you believe that our greatest challenges can become our greatest strengths, hit that subscribe button. Because tonight's story will show you that sometimes the very thing that breaks us is what makes us extraordinary. The fluorescent lights of the Johns Hopkins Neuroscience Laboratory hummed overhead as Dr. Sarah Mitchell reviewed her research data one final time. At 35, she was one of the youngest principal investigators in the department, known for her groundbreaking work on mood disorders and neural plasticity. Her colleagues respected her meticulous research methods, her innovative experimental designs, and her uncanny ability to spot patterns in brain imaging data that others missed. What they didn't know was that Sarah Mitchell had been living with bipolar disorder for 15 years, and that her most significant scientific breakthrough had come not despite her condition, but because of it. The sterile environment of the laboratory contrasted sharply with the chaos of Sarah's memories from 15 years earlier. The ordered rows of expensive neuroimaging equipment, the carefully calibrated computers displaying brain scans in vivid colors, the hushed conversations of research assistants analyzing data. This was a world of precision, control, and rational inquiry. It was also a world that Sarah had almost lost forever during her darkest period. The journey had begun in Ward 7 of Baltimore General Hospital's psychiatric unit, where 20-year-old Sarah had been committed during her first major manic episode. She'd been a junior at Johns Hopkins University then, double majoring in neuroscience and mathematics, maintaining a perfect GPA while working in 3 different research labs. The manic episode had started gradually. Sarah noticed she needed less sleep, felt more creative, could solve problems faster than usual. She'd attributed it to excitement about her senior thesis research. For 2 weeks, she functioned at what felt like superhuman levels, reading entire textbooks in single nights, making connections between disparate research fields, writing papers with clarity that impressed her professors. Her roommate Jennifer later described those weeks as watching Sarah transform into someone else entirely. She would come home at 3 a.m. from the library, completely wired, talking a mile a minute about breakthrough insights, Jennifer recalled. She'd reorganize our entire apartment, then start cooking elaborate meals at 4 a.m., all while explaining complex theories about neurotransmitter pathways. But mania doesn't know when to stop. The elevated mood became irritability. The increased energy became agitation. The enhanced creativity became paranoid delusions. Sarah began to see patterns everywhere, in the arrangement of books in the library, in the scheduling of her classes, in her professors' comments. What started as legitimate scientific insights morphed into elaborate conspiracy theories. On March 15th, 2008, campus security found Sarah in the neuroscience building at 4 a.m., having broken into 3 laboratories. She was convinced the university was conducting illegal experiments on student volunteers. She'd filled 17 whiteboards with mathematical equations that she claimed proved her theory. The equations were mathematically sound. Sarah's training hadn't abandoned her even in psychosis. but the conclusions belonged to a mind that had lost its grip on reality. Dr. Elizabeth Harper, the psychiatrist who treated Sarah during her 3-week hospitalization, had seen hundreds of manic episodes, but she'd rarely encountered someone whose delusions were so sophisticated, whose paranoid theories incorporated such detailed scientific knowledge. Your brain doesn't just speed up during mania, Dr. Harper explained, once medications had stabilized Sarah's mood. It makes connections, some real, some imaginary. The challenge is learning to tell the difference. The diagnosis of bipolar I disorder hit Sarah like a physical blow. She'd grown up in an academic family where mental illness was viewed as a character flaw. Her father, Dr. Richard Mitchell, was a physics professor at MIT. Her mother, Dr. Helen Mitchell, was a research psychologist. Both were brilliant, rational people who believed the mind could be controlled through proper application of scientific principles. The aftermath of her hospitalization was devastating. Word spread through the small world of academic neuroscience. Professors who had praised her work now questioned her stability. Research opportunities evaporated overnight. Friends distanced themselves. Sarah found herself isolated, stigmatized, facing an uncertain future in the field she'd hoped to revolutionize. The most painful part wasn't the lost opportunities. It was the sense that her own mind had betrayed her. Sarah had always prided herself on her rationality. The realization that her brain could generate convincing but false beliefs shook her confidence in everything. But Dr. Harper saw something different in Sarah's case. During therapy sessions, she noticed Sarah's insights about her condition were remarkably sophisticated. She could describe neurochemical changes with scientific precision, hypothesize about underlying mechanisms, and articulate differences between medicated and unmedicated thinking with startling clarity. You understand your own brain better than most neuroscientists understand the brains they study, Dr. Harper told Sarah during one pivotal session. Have you ever considered that your condition might not be a barrier to your research, but an advantage? The suggestion seemed absurd. How could mental illness be an advantage in studying mental illness? But as Sarah stabilized on lithium and returned to studies, she started noticing things others missed. During lectures on mood disorders, she could identify flaws in research methodologies, gaps in theoretical frameworks, assumptions that didn't match her lived reality. Sarah's observations were particularly acute regarding the subjective experience of different mood states. Academic researchers could measure brain activity and neurotransmitter levels, but they couldn't access the internal experience of hypomanic thinking or bipolar depression. Sarah could provide that missing piece. Sarah's senior thesis focused on neural connectivity patterns during different mood states. While other students relied solely on brain imaging data, Sarah had access to something unique: detailed first-person accounts of what those brain states actually felt like. She could correlate objective measurements with subjective experiences in ways pure researchers couldn't. Her thesis advisor was initially skeptical. Subjective reports are unreliable, he warned. We can't base scientific conclusions on what people think they're experiencing. But Sarah's research began telling a compelling story. The patterns she identified matched her personal experiences with startling precision, providing a bridge between objective neuroscience and subjective reality that had been missing. Sarah's undergraduate research caught the attention of Dr. Amanda Foster at Johns Hopkins. Dr. Foster had studied bipolar disorder for 20 years, published over 200 papers, received multiple NIH grants totaling over $15 million. But she'd never worked with a researcher who had lived experience of the condition they were studying. Graduate school presented new obstacles. Sarah had to disclose her diagnosis on applications, knowing it might hurt her chances. Many programs were reluctant to admit students with mental health conditions, concerned about liability and reliability. But Johns Hopkins, impressed by her research and intrigued by her unique perspective, offered her a full fellowship in their mood disorders research program. Dr. Foster became her advisor, approaching the situation with scientific curiosity. The early years tested Sarah's resilience unexpectedly. Medication side effects were challenging in an environment demanding peak mental performance. Lithium caused tremors, making writing difficult, plus significant weight gain affecting self-esteem. Antipsychotic drugs made her feel mentally sluggish, thoughts moving through thick fog. More challenging was learning to manage research schedules around mood fluctuations. Sarah developed acute awareness of her mental state, recognizing early signs of hypomania or depression beginning to affect her concentration. Some fellow students whispered about whether someone with mental illness should study mental illness, questioning her objectivity. Others were supportive but sometimes patronizing, viewing her as inspirational rather than simply competent. Sarah persevered, driven by unique motivation her colleagues couldn't understand. Every research paper, experiment, and data analysis was informed by her personal understanding of living with bipolar disorder. She could spot methodological flaws others missed because she knew what questions weren't being asked. Her breakthrough came during fourth-year graduate work, analyzing brain imaging data from emotional processing studies in bipolar patients. Most researchers focused on obvious differences: increased activity during mania, decreased during depression. But Sarah noticed something else: subtle connectivity patterns between brain regions that others overlooked. During hypomanic episodes, Sarah's brain felt different in indescribable ways. Thoughts moved faster, but it wasn't just speed. It was about connections between ideas. Concepts that seemed unrelated suddenly appeared part of larger patterns. Creative insights emerged spontaneously. Solutions seemed obvious, and she could hold multiple complex ideas simultaneously. She'd assumed this was simply elevated mood subjective experience. But analyzing imaging data, she realized the hypomanic brain showed increased connectivity between regions involved in pattern recognition, creative thinking, and information integration. The subjective experience had objective neurological basis. What if hypomania isn't just dysregulated mood? Sarah asked Dr. Foster. What if it's a different cognitive state that enhances certain types of thinking? Sarah spent 2 years designing rigorous experiments to test her hypothesis. She developed cognitive assessments measuring pattern recognition, creative problem solving, and insight formation. Working with the university's IRB, she recruited bipolar patients willing to be tested during different mood states. The results were remarkable. During mild hypomanic episodes, bipolar patients consistently outperformed controls on tasks requiring creative insight, pattern detection, and seeing connections between unrelated concepts. The effect sizes were large and highly statistically significant. But Sarah's research went beyond cognitive testing. She used advanced neuroimaging techniques to map brain connectivity patterns during different mood states. She identified specific neural networks that became hyper-connected during hypomania, involving regions critical for creativity, insight, and information integration. The neuroimaging data provided objective validation for what Sarah had experienced subjectively. The increased connectivity wasn't random. It followed predictable patterns enhancing certain cognitive abilities, while potentially creating vulnerability to racing thoughts and poor judgment. Sarah's findings' implications were profound and controversial. For decades, psychiatry had viewed bipolar disorder purely through pathology's lens, symptoms to be suppressed, cognitive differences to be eliminated. Sarah's research suggested a more nuanced picture. While severe mania was harmful, mild hypomanic states might represent advantageous information processing. Her doctoral dissertation was defended before 5 distinguished professors. The defense lasted nearly 3 hours, with committee members questioning methodology, interpretation, and broader implications. Dr. Robert Kim, an external examiner, raised concerns about potential misinterpretation. "This work is methodologically sound," he acknowledged, "but I worry about the message. Bipolar disorder destroys lives. We shouldn't celebrate it or suggest it's beneficial." Sarah's response was measured but passionate. "I'm not celebrating bipolar disorder. I'm trying to understand it completely. Every person with this condition experiences enhanced creativity alongside depression and dysfunction. If we understand neural mechanisms underlying different states, we might develop treatments preserving benefits while minimizing risks." Sarah's research attracted pharmaceutical companies interested in developing new bipolar treatments. Traditional medications focused on mood stabilization, often costing creativity and cognitive flexibility that patients valued most. During postdoctoral research at the National Institute of Mental Health, working with Dr. Lisa Chen, Sarah began developing new medication classes based on her understanding of neural connectivity patterns. Instead of dampening all elevated mood states, they developed drugs targeting specific neurotransmitter pathways while preserving networks associated with enhanced cognition. The first clinical trials included patients who had struggled with traditional medications, people whose symptoms were controlled, but who felt treatment had cost them creativity and intellectual sharpness. The new protocol, selective mood network modulation, showed remarkable Phase 2 results involving 200 patients across 5 medical centers. Patients reported stable mood without cognitive dulling effects. Creativity assessment scores remained elevated compared to traditional medications, while severe manic episode risks were significantly reduced. Quality of life measures showed dramatic improvements. Sarah's research was published in Nature Neuroscience, one of the field's most prestigious journals. The paper was accompanied by an editorial calling it a paradigm shift in mood disorder understanding. Publication triggered media attention avalanches. Interview requests poured in from Scientific American, The New York Times, NPR, and medical conferences worldwide. Sarah became a public spokesperson for new bipolar understanding. But the most meaningful response came from patients and families. Daily letters arrived from people feeling seen and understood for the first time. "For the first time, someone is telling me my brain isn't just broken," wrote one patient. "Maybe hypomanic thinking isn't just a symptom to suppress. Maybe it's part of who I am." The pharmaceutical applications led to founding Mitchell Neurosciences, focused on developing precision mood disorder treatments. Sarah served as chief scientific officer while maintaining academic positions, overseeing both basic research and clinical applications. 5 years later, Dr. Sarah Mitchell was appointed director of the Bipolar Research Institute at Johns Hopkins. At 35, she was the youngest person ever in such a position, overseeing a $50 million annual budget and 200 staff members. The appointment wasn't without controversy. Some senior faculty questioned whether someone with bipolar disorder should lead such research. But Sarah's scientific excellence, innovative approaches, and ability to attract funding ultimately won over skeptics. Her institute's mission was ambitious: transformed bipolar disorder understanding and treatment within a decade. Research ranged from basic neuroscience to clinical trials, to health services research improving care access. The irony wasn't lost on Sarah that her greatest scientific achievement emerged from her deepest struggle. The same neural patterns leading to hospitalization, hyperconnectivity, enhanced pattern recognition, ability to see relationships others missed, enabled discoveries that eluded other researchers. During a keynote address, Sarah reflected, "For too long, we viewed mental illness only through pathology's lens. We focused on what's wrong with different brains without considering what might simply be different. My research suggests the bipolar brain, under right conditions with appropriate support, can access cognitive states unavailable to neurotypical individuals. Traditional bipolar treatment forced people to choose between stability and creativity. Sarah's research offered a third option, preserving cognitive gifts while minimizing risks. Sarah's personal life flourished alongside professional success. She'd married Dr. James Park, a fellow researcher, had 2 children, and monitored them for inherited neural patterns. But unlike previous generations, she didn't view this possibility with dread. If her children inherited her patterns, they'd grow up understanding their brains, equipped with management tools, aware their differences could be strengths. On the evening she finalized her latest research paper, a comprehensive review influencing treatment protocols worldwide. Sarah stood again at the laboratory whiteboard. Her hands still shook from lithium, but now she wore that tremor as honor. It proved she'd found ways to live with her condition rather than despite it, using her different brain as a discovery tool rather than shame source. The equations represented more than scientific formulas. They were transformation testimonies. The same neural patterns once leading to paranoid delusions now enabled breakthrough insights. The hyperconnectivity, once overwhelming her with chaotic thoughts, now allowed her to see data patterns others missed. As Sarah prepared to submit research for publication, she thought about a morning letter from a newly diagnosed graduate student. "I thought my science career was over," the student wrote. "Then I read your research and realized maybe my diagnosis isn't my dream's end. Maybe it's the beginning of different contributions." Dr. Sarah Mitchell turned off laboratory lights and headed home, carrying knowledge that tomorrow she'd continue her life's mission work. The lithium would still make her hands shake, and she'd still need careful mood monitoring. But she'd wake knowing her bipolar brain, properly understood, carefully managed, channeled toward meaningful work, wasn't her greatest limitation, but her greatest gift. The breakthrough, starting with a hospital psychiatric ward manic episode, had revolutionized bipolar disorder treatment worldwide. Sarah Mitchell had proven that sometimes the very thing breaking us enables us to help heal others. The same brain that nearly destroyed her had indeed saved millions of others, and that was an equation worth celebrating. If this story resonated with you, remember that mental health challenges don't define your limitations. They might reveal your unique strengths. Share your thoughts about neurodiversity and mental health in the comments below, and subscribe for more stories proving our greatest challenges can become our most powerful tools for helping others.